One of our colleagues looked at an email coming in that was an interesting question. It's our concept of outgrowing addiction. So at the Life Process Program, we believe and we know that the majority of people who get in trouble with something, a substance, an activity, some sort of involvement, um, they wind up maturing out of that experience. So the idea that they're wedded to a drug, let's say, to the extent that that causes distress in their lives, goes away when more interesting things happen in their life. They get married, they have work, they have fulfillment. And then you can look at a small percentage of people, although it's still a big number, it's a small percentage of people who become addicted, who they continue being addicted. And then at LPP, we ask, go, what's going on here? And the answer is usually they haven't not found life fulfillment to the extent that it usurps their addiction. So somebody wrote in saying basically, I believe in what you're saying, or I'm at least flirting with the idea that outgrowing addiction is a thing. But I've been at it for a long time. I've been addicted for a while. I mean, how long? I mean, if I've been addicted for 20 years, let's say, am I out of the picture? Am I one of these people that can't outgrow addiction? And we had somebody in mind who we wanted to talk to, and maybe we still will, about this idea, because the person we wanted to talk to had been at it for a long time, maybe even considered themselves addicted, and I don't know, maybe even diseased until they started leaning on the idea that addiction is not a disease. I volunteered myself as somebody who was in a cycle of drug use for a long time that caused impairment in my life. And so I said, well, why not me? You made a good point. You said there's something about me that I don't really care that that I use drugs. So I'm not a good example of somebody who could relate to this person, because even though I used drugs in a destructive way for a while, I did grow out of it. But I'm never looking back and saying, I was an addict or I'm a recovering addict or something like that. I'm kind of saying, yeah, I was really dumb, but then I kind of grew up and then leaned into myself and now I'm good.
You've never uttered the phrase "I'm in recovery."
No, that's not true. I have, but I think I did to you once, and I almost recoiled in using it. But I thought that's what people said, and you didn't tell me don't use that. But I think you helped give me permission to speak a little bit more clearly and honestly. Yeah, and so I don't.
How do you think about why don't you want to tell people I'm in recovery? Why do you want to just come to them as you?
Right, I'm in recovery suggests that there's still something like living there inside me, and I don't want people who are looking forward at the prospect of a better life to think I might get better, but there's this maintenance that I have to do to keep this tumor of addiction at bay. You know what I mean? And so,
You must know the movie. What is it called? The Alien or something?
right, right, right. It's like the alien. Uh, so yeah, and it's not how I think about it. So I want people to know I don't want to be polite and say I'm in recovery, and I do have to be careful because you never know what's around the corner. I want people to know that I did something sort of extreme in a lot of people's minds. That they wouldn't pin me for somebody who would use heroin to the extent that I was I took money,
Hospitalized.
right? Hospitalized, took money from people I know. Really rejected my own value system, and it's hard for me to think about myself that way. But even though I acknowledged that there was a right and wrong, and a lot of times I did a morally wrong thing, I don't absolve myself by saying the disease made me do it. I think it's better for me in my life that I know that I can make choices, and when I had some fulfillment in my
What do
life, I was
you
better.
do when you meet a colleague that you're supposed to be interacting seriously with who does the whole recovery thing? How do you personally handle them?
Well, you're asking me to be honest. Uh, The go with the flow answer here would be that I would reject that. I do reject that in my mind. My thought is, I guess you just don't get it. Why don't you move on? My line of questioning is more open ended, and usually it's sort of questioning about, well, what are you up to now? Oh, cool. It sounds like you've really sunk your teeth into something that benefits you.
It's
Sounds
almost
like
like you shift their perspective to the foreground
right.
where they're not talking like a recovery. I'm not going to criticize your approach, Zach. You're avoiding confrontation, but trying to get them in the mindset. Is that a
Yeah.
fair,
I think I might treat a colleague like I would
a
a
patient?
participant in our program. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think that somebody would care if I disagreed with them, they might. It's possible that they would give it a second thought if I open it up to them. I don't know.
I'll give you a bad counterexample of why your approach is good. I got in a discussion. Somebody wrote me on LinkedIn about having just joined the staff at, it's called Oasis, the Organization of Alcohol and Addiction Services in New York State. And I looked her up on the website, and it says I'm recovered, blah 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 blah. And I wrote her back, and I said, I don't think people should be employed who, when they come to a professional position, declare, "Oh, I'm recovered. I believe in the disease theory," and I can. They're saying a whole statement about them. It would be like you saying to a client, "Well, I believe in harm reduction. You have to start drinking." You know what I mean?
Right.
That's
Right.
not therapy. It's argumentation. And she requested that I stop communicating with her. So that's the yin and the yang of our approaches, Zach.
I don't know. I always think I'm pretty radical. God, I guess I could just say it's a colleague I work with in Vermont schools. It called me out on not being radical enough recently, and it was really because I was being thoughtful and not confrontational. I said something about a balanced view, and she mistook what I was saying, but she said a balanced view. Well, that's an interesting way of saying, yeah, let's make sure we have enough of the standard view in there, but I'll accept your wacky view. And she made an example of, what do you think about rapes and murders? You want a bit of them, balanced view.
A little bit of sexual assault.
I'm not always taking it at what I mean when I'm trying to be thoughtful. So I do.
I was afraid that I would piss a ton. I actually wrote a blog post on LinkedIn saying people who say they're in recovery shouldn't be employed and should be fired from helping agencies. I thought, uh-oh. But I got quite a ton of positive responses and hits. Sometimes it surprises you when you're going to land on your feet.
Well, I will say, yeah, people like when they're given permission to think thoughts they're not allowed to say out loud, aren't they? And even though I'm not the best example of, in this case, of somebody who maybe identify themselves as having a disease and, oh, wait, maybe I can grow out of it. We do work with a lot of people, and we work with people all over the world. And the most interesting people I've ever met are people who, let's say, for 30 years I've been doing this shit and I've got to stop. And then I've gotten to a point where they say, I've been doing this for 30 years and thanks for helping me think about the reasons why I do it. I don't know if I want to stop, but I do have a lot to live for, and so that's pretty good. And it's like not a happy ending with the cherry on top, but it's so I get yeah.
We have to tolerate one thing that everybody says: you have to tolerate imperfection. Harm reduction isn't always getting better. That's sort of what you're saying, right? They're with you.
I mean, I've worked with and know a lot of people who have completely cut out drinking or drugs from their lives, and they feel the better for it, and they don't really look back, and they were drinking over drinking for 30 years, and they stopped, and they're fine. Um, right, but then there's like this messy kind of group of people who I'm the most interested in, who seem to just decide, okay, my life's pretty good, but it's still like an outsider might say, well, you're a mess, but they're taking care of the stuff they want to take care of, and they're living their values. And so ranging from that to people who somehow manage to completely stop whatever their object of their addiction is, there's everything in between.
Well, that's Ken Anderson and Hams. They kind of take in all comers.
Yeah.
You can still be addicted, and you should talk to people and get healthy input, supportive inputs.
Right. And then there's Keith Richards. So let's say no more.
He still drinks. So the person that wrote in said, I haven't quit I believe what you say, kind of, I haven't quit my addiction for 20 years. Are there people that can't quit their addictions? Or am I just a failure? So I want to start out by talking about two pieces of research that are each more fascinating than the other. And I'm going to pose the question to you, Zach, so be ready. In 1964, they announced that smoking caused cancer. They didn't say it was addictive. And when you tell people something will kill them, an awful lot of people will quit. And so somewhere down the road, around 2003, the National Institute of Health did a project called People Who Don't Quit. And all the researchers that went into it had the hypothesis, well, they must have had a particularly dependent personality. They were more heavily dependent. Not one single theory proved true. So they said, we're embarrassed. Our summary is people don't quit addictions early or when you think they might, smoking, which is so harmful. But there's nothing we can actually say to differentiate the people who quit 10 or 20 years later. They're sort of making the same decision belatedly. And I'll switch to another researcher. There's a man named Gene Heyman. He's not a clinician. He untracks all the research the government does. And and most people quit cocaine and heroin within a few short years. It's a tough addiction to hold on. Some don't. And he's a statistical guy. He said all of the same functions predicted people who quit at 3 years, at 10 years, and at 20 years. How do you understand that, Zach? How do you understand that they're more or less the same people? They just didn't get around to it for 20 years. Can you put words on that?
Yeah, I mean, people have stuff to do, and people become mature, but people's belief systems take greater or lesser time frames to acclimate to the thing that they want to do.
I would take a more pragmatic approach.
You can be more practical than that?
I could be almost existential and say, one day somebody at 20 years into an addiction says, screw this. And it's just hard to know what about them made them decide that at that moment.
I guess that's what I'm trying to say is that whatever the thing is they believe about the function that thing serves or doesn't, that's unpredictable. But like what hits them, right? What's the tipping point for them is unpredictable. But the types of things that make them get to that point, that Heyman and you and I are saying are pretty predictable.
I agree. So we were going to have a colleague here who's been detained by family illness. She had an opioid addiction for quite a long time. And yet her prognosticators were good. She had both a good immediate family, core family, and extended family. And she had a good skill set. And when she wrote a blog post about it, which was called Radical Acceptance, one of the most honest things she said was, I don't really know why I was addicted. I can't really. And she gave how it fit into her life and everything like that.
That's probably a million times more accurate than people who fill in the story with some, including me. Like, I bet you my story about why I was addicted, it's what I believe. I bet it's not quite right. I bet I don't know is more true.
I think that's true. Her best thing is to say the role the addiction when she was addicted played in her life. It gave her gratification because she was good at it. And it was kind of an achievement thing, which is sort of not a reason why you become a drug dealer and drug user. But
you don't know you're good at it until you're good at it, right?
And you could still say, do I really want to be good at this? And she did have children. So flash forward, this ties up a lot of loose ends. She went to rehab eventually. After years and all, I'll just have to tell the story. It's funny. She's married to the same man. They've just gotten a new apartment. And I said, your husband makes quite a lot of money. Most people who make quite a lot of money own a house. And she burst into laughter and said, oh, we've owned 2 houses. And you have to reconstruct how she deconstructed 2 houses. Okay. But at some point, so she went to rehab, and at some point, she decided she didn't want to do that anymore. And that original transition came with going with the rehab, deciding she, whatever, was an addict, and going along with that whole ball of wax. But for another reason, I don't know the explanation for, that never worked for her. For some people, that doesn't work. So flash forward, she came across Smart Recovery, Dharma Recovery, and then eventually us. And she said, why do I have to think of myself as an addict forever? Who decided that? Which is basically what we're saying. And then she does harm reduction. She drinks alcohol. She smokes some pot. She'd be reluctant to freelance with the drugs that previously got her in trouble. I don't think she turned down a painkiller in a painkiller operational situation.
I'd take one right now. No, I'm kidding. Sorry.
Have you had painkillers since your?
I don't think so, actually. Maybe. I don't know.
You endure pain well, do you?
I guess so. I don't know. Off-color joke is what I was making. Yeah.
So this gets back to the question of, when you look at her, she looks like a normal person. Just drinks some, smokes some pot. She doesn't call herself an addict. She has a family. She's getting her licensure. How's she different than any other person you run into at the shopping mall?
Right.
And yet she was sort of kind of the worst addict, endangering our whole family that she loves so much. And now she's not. And she doesn't feel she's in any danger of relapse. And to look at her, I would say that this is not a woman who's going to relapse and all. So I want to get back. We had the data about the people who quit smoking late, and they sort of have the same personalities, and they're more or less dependent, like the people who quit early. Same with all the heroin and coke addicts. And what can you say about that? But from a clinical standpoint, in the life process program, and I'm going to say, I know you believe this. Why didn't we end with this? You believe that anybody that you can talk to is capable. You're not discouraged 10, 20 years or whatever. You're not discouraged from discussing that person the possibility. Well, you don't have to be addicted anymore. That's sure. One outcome. And you really believe that?
Yeah.
Can you give any just why you believe that, or your hopefulness in mankind, your own experience, or that's just the way life is?
It would be a good summary of everything you just said. I know that I don't know for sure. I know that if people are seeking some sort of assistance, there must be some kernel of belief there that they could do something better, even if it's a dire hope. They want to. When I talk to someone and I know them enough that they can articulate what's going on with themselves, they can certainly think cognitively, they could be thoughtful enough to make it the kind of decision that would lead to non-addiction. And there seems to be no rule about exactly what hits somebody over the head one day to say, I'm going to turn a leaf, screw it. And I've watched that happen to people. And I think we're no better than Heyman about what the rule is, about what helps people turn the leaf, except that we can ask questions that kind of provoke them to think about their overall value set so that they can start to inspect it. And I think that anyone who does that has a pretty good shot, and they will have no better shot if I believe that they can't do it.
So you're willing to enter into an open-ended discussion and see where it goes?
Completely. I really do believe it, though. I don't believe it because I'm supposed to. I really do believe that.
I believe that.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we end on the story of Uncle Oscar? He's sort of the theme person. To remind people, Uncle Oscar started smoking unfiltered cigarettes, 4 packs a day, at the age of 18. 25 years later, the year before the Surgeon General said it causes cancer, he went to a bar for lunch with a coworker. They raised the price of cigarettes 35 cents. And he put 35 cents in, and the coworker said, look at Ozzy. He's a sucker for the tobacco companies. And when I say to people, well, why did Ozzy quit? They go, oh, he's cheap. And I say, well, there's something about Ozzy. Ozzy was a shop steward. He was way, way, way anti-capitalist. That woman's, how many ever words she said? 20. Boom. I'm a sucker for the tobacco company. Take me out back and shoot me in the head. That's never, ever, I don't care. I'll cut my hand off and not do that. So quitting smoking, whatever. He could do it.
Right. And who would have predicted that?
Not him.
So to tie it all together, there's no rule about if you've been addicted for a certain amount of time, you're out of the picture or you're out of the running.
You and I in the Life Process program, you said this. Nobody's going to come in there and you're going to say, oh, we're not going to work with you. You've been addicted too long. But you're saying something more than that. You believe. Well, you're willing to tolerate wherever they're going to go, but you believe that they can quit the addiction. You believe it.
And to go back, there's going to be segments here that stand alone, but one of them is going to run the whole length of our discussion today. And let's just say a good summary would be, you predicted long ago, as harsh as it may have seemed to have said, that reminding people that they're in recovery and diseased is actually what causes more people to be in recovery and diseased. And
William Cope Moyers is the proof of the pudding. We've discussed right. William Cope Moyers. We discussed you're not saying you're in recovery. We've discussed 20, how many ever long years you've been in addiction. They all have that thematic unity.
Well, you know how I am. We've been provocative enough. So I think we could sign off for the day. And thanks for talking, Stanton.
Pleasure. Later, Zach.